Right now, on a website you have never heard of, someone is selling a small brown bottle of plant extract for the better part of $20. The label promises it will slow heavy bleeding, quiet a nosebleed, ease a punishing period. What the label leaves out is that the plant sealed inside that bottle grows free in the crack of the sidewalk outside your front door, and that a little over 100 years ago, army doctors gathered that very same plant by the armful, on their knees in the mud, because it was the last thing left that could keep a wounded man from bleeding to death. Picture a field dressing station in France, in the winter of 1917. A doctor reaches for the medicine that stops a hemorrhage, and the shelf is bare. The drug he needs is drawn from a fungus that grows on rye, and the war has severed the supply at its source. So he does something no modern hospital would dream of. He sends men out into the ditches to pull up a small green plant with heart-shaped seed pods, a plant every one of them had stepped over since they were children. Within the hour, a liquid pressed from it is slowing the bleeding of the wounded. It worked well enough that armies leaned on it through 2 world wars. And then, the moment the shelves filled back up, medicine quietly set it down and walked away. If it worked, why was it forgotten? Welcome to nature's lost vault. It is not rare, and it is not exotic. Botanists call it Capsella bursa-pastoris, a member of the mustard family, and it is one of the most common plants on Earth. You will find it in sidewalk cracks, in gravel driveways, in the tired soil at the edge of a parking lot, carrying tiny white flowers and those flat green pods shaped like the little leather purses shepherds once hung from their belts. That shape is where it got its name. Most people who see it, if they notice it at all, reach for the mower. People have leaned on this plant for a very long time. Archaeologists found its seeds at Catalhoyuk, a Neolithic town in what is now Turkey, buried in soil nearly 8,000 years old. In the 1st century, the Greek physician Dioscorides wrote down a small pouch-shaped plant that stopped bleeding. 1,500 years later, the English herbalist Nicholas Culpeper put it in his Herbal and praised it for every kind of bleeding, inward and outward, from a soldier's wound to a common nosebleed. On separate continents, in centuries that never touched, people kept reaching for the same roadside plant for the same reason: to stop blood. That reputation is exactly what carried it into a war. When the Great War began in 1914, European medicine had 2 dependable tools for a serious hemorrhage. One was ergot, the dark fungus on rye. The other was golden seal, an American woodland root sold as hydrastis. Both moved through international trade, and the war cut both off almost overnight. In Britain and in Germany alike, the ergot and the golden seal ran dry. So doctors fell back on the plant in the hedgerow. A liquid extract of shepherd's purse, steeped from the fresh plant in boiling water, went straight onto the shelf as a substitute. For centuries, the old herbals had claimed it matched ergot and golden seal. Now that claim was being tested on the worst wounds a battlefield could produce. And this is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. The plant refused to behave like the drugs it was standing in for. For most of history, when a plant stopped bleeding, chemists had one explanation ready: tannins, the same harsh compounds that dry out your mouth in a cup of strong tea that tanners used to turn raw hide into leather. Tannins pulled tissue tight, and that was the mechanism everyone trusted. But when 19th century researchers went looking for tannins in shepherd's purse, they found almost none. Nowhere near enough to explain what the plant did on an open wound. Whatever was happening was stranger than that, and it came with a flaw that drove pharmacists to distraction. Pick the plant fresh, and it worked. let it dry in a jar for a single season, and the power was simply gone. At the time, that looked like nothing more than a storage problem. It was the whole story in miniature. Because there was a second explanation, one that a handful of investigators raised and could never quite kill. Shepherd's purse is often coated in a fine white mildew, a fungus that films across its leaves and stems and leaves behind a faint, fishy smell. One researcher, a pharmacognosist named Steinmetz, floated an unsettling idea. What if a real share of the plant's blood-stopping fame never belonged to the plant at all, but to that mildew growing on it? If he was even partly right, then the wild plant that saved men in a muddy field owed some of its power to a fungus that turned up one summer and vanished the next, which would finally explain the thing no one else could. Why two handfuls of the same plant, pulled from two different ditches, could act like two completely different medicines? Most people never heard that part. But the doctors of the 1930s were living inside it, and they had run out of patience. When the Second World War arrived, Britain hit the same wall all over again. German occupation of Europe and submarines in the shipping lanes strangled the drug supply by the early 1940s, and this time the country got organized about it. In 1941, the Ministry of Health set up a vegetable drugs committee at the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew, guided by the Medical Research Council. More than 70 county herb committees formed across Britain, most of them run by the women of the Women's Institute and the Scottish Women's Rural Institutes. Grandmothers, school teachers, Boy Scouts and Girl Guides walked the hedgerows collecting the medicines the country could no longer buy. A bleeding stopper growing in every lane in England was exactly what they were sent to gather. But at the very moment those women were filling their baskets, a discovery in a laboratory was quietly making the whole effort unnecessary. 6 years earlier, in 1935, two men in England, a chemist named Harold Ward Dudley and an obstetrician named John Chassar Moir, had finally cracked open the rye fungus and drawn out the single pure compound that did the work. They named it ergometrine. For the first time, a doctor could hold in his hand the exact thing that stopped a hemorrhage. Not a fungus, not a plant brew of unknown strength, but a measured dose that behaved the same way every single time. That was the one thing the plant could never offer. Hand a doctor Shepherd's purse, and he had no way of knowing whether this batch was strong or weak, fresh or spent, mildewed or clean. Hand him ergometrine, and he could measure out 1/2 milligram and know, to the letter, what would happen next. In a hospital, the reliable thing wins. Every time. And here the story turns away from the one you might be expecting. Moir could have patented ergometrine and grown rich from it. He refused. He insisted the method be published in full, free for any company on Earth to manufacture. Nobody locked the knowledge in a vault. There was simply a dependable drug that saved a staggering number of mothers from bleeding to death after childbirth, and beside it, a roadside plant that worked sometimes in a way no one could promise. In those same years, a Danish scientist, Henrik Dam, identified vitamin K, the very nutrient the body uses to form a clot, and later won a Nobel Prize for it. One more exact, dependable tool for the job the plant had always done by luck. You would think someone would have kept studying the plant anyway, if only to understand it. Almost no one did. It was free, it could not be patented, and there was no fortune waiting at the end of the research. So it fell out of the medical books and back into the ditches it came from, and the world stopped seeing it. It never actually left, of course. If you want to find it, wait for early spring and look along any path or fence line for a low rosette of jagged, dandelion-like leaves, then a thin stalk of small white flowers, and beneath them those flat, heart-shaped pods climbing the stem like beads on a string. The young leaves are good to eat, peppery, closer to arugula than to lettuce, and cooks in Korea, Japan, and China have gathered them for generations. One honest caution, and it matters. Because this plant can nudge the muscles of the womb, it is one to leave well alone during pregnancy. Learn its shape once, and you will never be able to unsee it. And here is where it all comes back around. In the last 20 years, researchers have started paying attention again. In 2011, Europe's Herbal Medicines Committee went back through the old records and issued a formal monograph recognizing shepherd's purse as a traditional remedy for heavy menstrual bleeding. In 2018, a clinical trial reported that it measurably reduced heavy menstrual flow in the women who took it. And a wide-ranging review published in 2024 pulled the modern findings together in one place, mapping not only the bleeding effects the old herbalists swore by, but anti-inflammatory and antibacterial activity that chemists are still working through. The pieces inside it, the flavonoids, the peptides, the potassium salts, and a genuine dose of that same vitamin K are being named at last, one at a time. Which brings us back to that small brown bottle for sale online, pressed from a plant standing free at the end of your road. Shepherd's purse was never a miracle, and it was never a secret anyone stole from you. Its story is quieter and stranger than that. It worked just well enough to carry armies through 2 wars, and just unreliably enough that the day science built something steadier, the world let it slip through its fingers. That is what tends to happen to the things nature gives away for free. They work, but they cannot be measured, and they cannot be owned, so they get set down and forgotten, while the ditch keeps growing them anyway. Those little heart-shaped purses have been riding that stem for 8,000 years. Most people will walk straight past them tomorrow morning. You will not. If this is the kind of story you want more of, the plants the record left behind and the honest reasons they were let go, subscribe to Nature's Lost Vault. The next vault opens soon.